Okay, so we'll go ahead and bring the Welfare Reform Committee meeting to order this Thursday, March 9th meeting. First item on the agenda today is to approve the minutes from the March 2nd meeting. Any comments, discussion on the minutes from the March 2nd meeting? Motion, Representative Hoagland. Representative Roth. I did. So a motion by Representative Hoagland and a second by Representative Howell to approve the minutes. All opposed, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes. Minutes are accepted. Representative Howell. Wow. Okay. Okay, so the minutes are approved as presented then. So I think we do have a presentation from DCF or from on Child Support Services. But before we do that, I think just to make that presentation not have a time constraint, I'd like to first take up House Bill 2140 for discussion and possible action on. So the 2140, I'll just start there with ask Jesse from the Revisor's Office to give a quick review on that bill before we start discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. I am Jesse with the Revisor's Statutes Office. So today we are going to revisit House Bill 2140. So some background information on House Bill 2140 is that the original bill as introduced, it amended KSA 39709, which is the statute that deals with public assistance programs administered by DCF. And so that includes food assistance, which can also be called SNAP. So this bill amends requirements to be eligible for that food assistance. So this original bill heard by the committee, the current law under subsection B17A prohibited the Secretary of DCF from requesting a waiver for time-limited assistance for able-bodied adults without dependents, ages 18 through 49, also commonly called ABODs. So they were limited to 3 months in a 36-month period if they are not meeting requirements that they work at least 20 hours a week or participate in a work program. So what House Bill 2140 did was they just changed that ABOD's age range from 18 to 49 to 59, so extending it from 49 to 59. And then additionally, under current law, under subsection B17 Cap D, it stated that ABODs 18 through 49 without dependents, who are not employed at least 30 hours a week, were subject to an employment and training program. And so House Bill 2140 also extended the age range and that reference too, so from the 49 to 59. So that included the subset of people who were not exempt and were able to work, ages 50 through 59, that were not being captured by the current age range. And so when the committee worked the bill, what the committee did was they amended that age range back. So page 8, line 32 and line 34, committee, turn that back to 49. So then that is only applicable to the original 18 through 49, and that was also done in the reference on page 9 and line 12. And then in that same amendment, the committee amended in a new 2i, and that is work registrants aged 50 through 59 without dependents, not exempt under the federal law. And so that wording is meant to capture the 50 through 59 people who are not exempt and able to work without including them in that original ABODs 18 through 49. So by adding that into the list, it states that the provisions of the sub-paragraph of the work requirements of enrollment in employment and training programs apply to ABODs 18 through 49, those work registrants not exempt, aged 50 through 59, and individuals who are not employed at least 30 hours per week currently. And I'm available for questions on the underlying bill or the committee amendments.
Thank you. Any questions for the revisor's office? Seeing none, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused. You changed 2140 to kind of two subcategories, one before 49 and 150 to 59. And I kind of, when I read through this, I thought, are we complying with the federal guidelines for the 50 to 59 now, or is it, I don't know where the guidelines are as far as SNAP for the able-bodied, people. Can you kind of explain that to me? Is there a federal guideline for that group, that subset 50 to 59, or is it just one of our subgroups that we changed? You see what I'm saying? Kind of, yeah.
Mr. Chair, Representative Miller. So right now, the federal requirements that the state opted into regarding that 18 through 49 is a federal guideline that as a state, we've adopted through statute. And so through this bill, you're creating a new subset that should be subject to that employment and training that is not necessarily required by the federal government.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any more questions for Jesse? That committee, any discussion or amendments on the bill? Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the discussion, and I'm understanding what the Representative Miller was stating here. So I think my concern also would be on this, that we would remain in federal compliance, because that we are now, from my reading, mandating the ENT program for ages 50 to 59. And I think this was something that we kept trying to get through in the previous hearing and working of the bill, and I remain confused on that point. So I would love if maybe we could talk about that and gain further clarification.
So I'm happy to fill in a little bit of clarification on that. So there's the general work requirements, and that's from age 16 to 59. It states, and this is from USDA's website on SNAP clarifications, work requirements. This is a document that has been emailed out to the committee at least once. In there on the general work requirements, this is age 16 to 59. It states people who are subject to general work requirements must register for work, take a suitable job if offered, and participate in a SNAP ENT program or workfare program if assigned by the state agency. And from all my reading, it is up to the state whether or not to require the participation in a SNAP ENT program or workfare program, and to if they're assigned by the agency.
I think I'm just a little confused still, because I know that was still, if I recall correctly, I might not, but that we were still having some issues with that language, and I believe that the DCF remained opposed to this because they were still concerned that we may fall out of federal compliance, even with the amended language, if I recall correctly.
If you do that, that's the first I've heard of that. So I've not heard anything about the falling out of compliance. I did talk with an attorney or got via email on the language, and this is an attorney that works on this issue on a nationwide basis. And this was language that he suggested. And it does fit exactly the wording from from what I understand, is the USDA's clarification work requirements, just calling them work registrants, age 50 to 59, and it's just requiring them to participate in a SNAP ENT program, which the state does have the right to do.
So the difference then would be the language used, calling them work registrants versus ABODs, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Can you explain to me what the principal difference is between those two categories a little more clearly?
So an ABOD is a work registrant, but an ABOD, according to the federal definition, is somebody between the ages of 18 and 49. And in that document, it talks about the ABOD time limit and work requirement. They have a little bit different time limit on how much time they can, how many months out of a 36-month period they can receive food assistance. And also they have a slightly different work requirement than a work registrant ages 16 to 18 or 50 to 59. It is confusing, but it's the federal government. You can blame them.
The federal government can be a problem from time to time. Thank you for trying to explain that to me. I appreciate it.
Any further discussion on the bill, committee? With that, committee, is there a motion with regards to House Bill 2140? Representative Wagner?
Yes, I make a motion, we pass it as amended.
We have a motion, and this motion is seconded by Representative Lewis. Is there discussion on the bill? Representative Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was opposed previously, and I remain opposed to this bill. I do have some concerns still regarding federal compliance, although I do appreciate that you did try to explain that as best as you could. I don't think that we've fully explored that within the committee, and I wish that we had a little bit more time to do so. But also, as I had previously mentioned, I am very concerned about the individuals that this affects. The folks that this bill specifically targets are typically engaged in workforce training or employment of some sort. And as I previously mentioned, I think one of the largest concerns I have, just from a professional standpoint, is that many of the individuals who may lose their benefits during this time period have an unrecognized disability, which may cause them not to be able to go to work. And because of limited health care access in the state of Kansas, due to other legislative issues, such as not expanding Medicaid, I think that this really makes it more difficult for people to comply and remain compliant. And I remain highly concerned that this could cause individuals to go through undue suffering and not be able to resolve issues related to hunger and support their families. So for that reason, I would be opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Committee, any further discussion on the bill? Representative Wagner.
Yes, I would just like to speak in support of the bill. Again, the predicate or the premise of what we're doing is simply extending what is already a requirement for persons age 18 to 49. That we're not actually instituting a new requirement that the social welfare system is not very used to working with, but it's just simply extending it in a certain fashion to persons age 50 to 59. It's kind of a minor tweak in my, thinking, and I think it's a wise one to make. So I hope we pass it out.
Any further discussion, Representative Pickert?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. From our discussion 2 days ago on good cause, it seems to me that if anybody is having challenges with potential disability, that there's probably a good cause that will exempt them from the work requirements, from what I understand from our discussion about good cause.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Wagner, you may close.
I move the bill.
Heard the motion. You pass House Bill.
Yes, I move my motion on House Bill 2140.
The motion and a second. All in favor of the bill, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Thank you, committee. And with that, I guess we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion with the Kansas Department of Children and Families. I believe it's Marcy Martinez. Welcome, and we're going to talk about child support services. I think DCF kind of brought this up, asked about whether the committee would appreciate a presentation on this. We did talk a little bit about it with a bill earlier on, and as we've seen, there's a lot to learn. So looking forward to the presentation. Thank you for coming.
Oh, sorry. This is my first time doing this. I'll just go ahead and go through the presentation. It's kind of a general overview of child support. Happy to answer questions as we go, and I'll take some pauses as well. The child support program itself, I'm on slide 2, falls under the umbrella of the Department of Health and Human Services, and then more specifically, the Office of Child Support Enforcement. Slide 3, OCSE, which is the Federal Child Support Enforcement Program, excuse me, involves 54 state and territories, plus around 50 tribal programs. And their responsibilities include recommending and implementing policies for state and tribal programs. They make child support guideline requirements. They set procedures to review programs. They audit our child support programs, and that includes several audits throughout the year, whether that's our data reliability, self-assessment, cycle audits, which is the entire program. And then they provide training and technical assistance, and they collect and report the data that we submit. The Kansas Child Support Program, the first time that most people encounter that is when they have a domestic support order, which can be spousal or child support. It's set by the courts, and it contains language that all support is to be paid through the Kansas Payment Center. Support orders at the KPC are identified as either 4D or non-4D. And then the non-4D cases fall into 2 categories. One is represented people, and then the court trustees. There are some counties that have court trustees. Next slide. Whether a case is non-4D or 4D depends on how they're referred. A 4D case is available, or the program is available in all counties and judicial districts at no cost to Kansans. The non-4D court trustees are in 17 of the 31 judicial districts, and a fee is charged to participants. The court trustee program is authorized by KSA 2375, and that's been around since prior to the 4D program was implemented. And then many district courts have also adopted administrative orders authorizing collection by the court trustee automatically. Cases come to the 4D program through an automatic assignment with some benefit programs, as you've all kind of learned through this committee, and then also by direct application of the parties.
Marcy?
Yes.
Ask a quick
Sure.
question here.
Yes.
When you talk about 4D.
Title 4D of the Social Security Act.
Okay.
So that's anything that DCF has.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Representative Hoagland?
So this looks like on slide 6, looks a little contradictory. It says at no cost to Kansans in one bullet point. And the very next one says a fee is charged.
The court trustee program charges a fee. So anyone that is not in the 4D program handled by DCF, they can choose to go to a court trustee if one's available in their county, and they take a percentage, and it varies by county, of what's collected. Does that make sense? Okay.
It does make sense, but I paid the fee as a Kansan, so I don't see that there's no charge to Kansans.
Representative Wagner.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, you say 4D means Title 4D, but what's the import of Title 4? I mean, how does an order become 4D versus non-4D, or what difference does it make?
Sure, that's Mr. Chair. So a 4D case is referred to us when someone's opened mandatory programs with DCF, so SNAP, the TANF, childcare, medical assistance. If they apply directly, they can also come into the 4D program, so they can submit an application even if they're not on the mandatory programs, and we will enforce those cases.
So are you saying that 4D cases are for people who are on public support of some type, and if you're not on public support, you're just a non-4D case? Is that the basic difference?
Mr. Chair. They can apply even if they're not on public assistance. So it's available to anyone with a child support order.
And if you don't mind me asking, and so why would they ask that? What's the benefit to the person with the support order on either end?
Why wouldn't they ask for it?
No, why would they? I mean,
it's a free service. We can establish parentage. We will enforce child support orders. We do modifications, sorry.
it'll become more clear as you make your presentation.
Any other questions?
So I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Representative
Just
Humphries.
kind of what you almost answered. So why would anyone not apply for 4D?
We're trying to figure that out. I mean, that's a good question. I think some of it's just education. I think, it's been a program that's been around for a long time that used to have a little bit different emphasis, more of a, we're after the deadbeat dad kind of thing, and that's really changed over the years, but there are still people that are, they don't want government involved in their divorce or whatever it is, and so I think it's just a lack of education mainly.
So the non-4D would have, it would just sort of be the court wouldn't be involved or the system wouldn't be involved.
So with a non-40 case, if it's a county that has a trustee, they're all handled a little bit differently. Some of them are automatically put into the court trustee's caseload. Some of them, they have to apply like they would for our cases. So those cases are similar to ours. They would enforce as well. But then we've got the counties that don't have anything. And I have a list of them, but they just either don't know about it or, again, don't want the government involved.
I bet you're going to come to the numbers, how many 4D and non-4D.
I don't think it's in the presentation, but I can give it to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. All right. I'm just make sure I understand this. So a 4D case would be for someone who is on public assistance, and a non-4D case would be for someone who's not on public assistance. Is that?
Not necessarily. So I know it's very complicated. So a 4D case is available to anyone. So if they need a parentage established, or if they've got a divorce case or just a child support order they want enforced, anyone can walk in, apply for our services. A non-4D case would be a case that is not under the DCF umbrella, if you want to call it that. They've just chosen not to apply, or they're choosing to go with a court trustee if they have that available.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, could you explain then what a court trustee is? If I'm as confused as the looks on everyone else's face. I'm still unclear as to what the 4D and the non-4D, the distinction is. If it's not, in fact, being currently on some form of public assistance, then what is the determining factor? Is that simply that someone should have this omniscient knowledge when they walk in and say, I would like to apply under the non-4D, or does an agent direct them? I'm just unclear on that. Thank you.
That's a great question, Mr. Chair. And again, it's a little complicated. Kansas is unique in that we have the court trustee program for some counties here. So again, some of the courts have issued administrative orders that automatically send someone to a court trustee program. If that person is open mandatory programs, then we would get involved with that, and it becomes a 40 case. In the counties that don't have a trustee, a lot of it is word of mouth. The attorneys let them know that our services are available, or the courts may let them know. Some courts will even put it in the orders that it can be enforced by the court trustee or DCF. Does that answer your question? I know it's very confusing, and which is kind of goes back to Representative Humphrey's question, is why people don't use it. They are confused by it.
It does continue to keep it somewhat cloudy, except for the portion that's very cloudy, which is what the definition of the court trustee is. What is that? What is their function? How do they or do not get involved?
They were authorized by statute before the Title 40 program ever existed. So they've been around enforcing child support since prior to our program being in existence, and it's just never gone away. So it's kind of created this split system so people can choose to go to a court trustee if they're not open a mandatory program. If they are open a mandatory program, they automatically are assigned to DCF. But someone can also just walk in and apply for our services if they have a divorce or a support order. So anyone can. It's available to anyone.
So I'm going to take a quick pause. Jesse, you ready? All right. So on the question of, well, I'll just turn it over to Jesse for a second here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So court trustees can be appointed by judges in their judicial districts. And it must be a person who is licensed to practice law, and they serve at the pleasure of the judicial district. And their duties include the collection of support or restitution from the obligor upon the written request of the obligee or upon the order of the court, and to compile a list of individuals who owe arrearages under a support order or have failed after appropriate notice to comply with a subpoena issued pursuant to a duty of support. The court trustee shall deliver that list to the Secretary of DCF on a quarterly basis or as requested by the Secretary. And that statute number is 2037-8.
Thank you for that. All right. Yeah. I think appreciate that. Representative Roth.
If you Google the 4D, there's a 50-page document on there that explains that you could read at your leisure, and it might be helpful. So I have it on I'm trying to follow along with you right now. So, but it is out there that helps. I can't say it explains it, but it helps. Thank you.
Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remembered my question. I'm getting lost in this. Okay, I may read that document actually, but this is kind of around the question of what IVD, or I'm sorry, 4D, I'm reading it, versus non-4D. So are all individuals who are not working with a court trustee typically required by court order to go through the 4D program?
They are not, no.
So individuals could be receiving child support outside of both
Correct.
systems as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's so 4D is just a program within DCF on how to help people go through the process to get child support.
Right. It's the title under the Social Security Act that authorizes the program itself, and that's just what we call it, is the 4D program.
And a non-4D is kind of
everything else.
court subsidized version of the same thing. State
in some counties, yes. Yeah.
And then there's a third option where somebody can just get a private attorney.
Correct.
Go that route.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Good to go. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So again, the 4D program serves any family who requests the services. We can only discuss the case with the parties, their attorneys, or those whom we have written permission. We accept families as they are, regardless of economic situation or family composition. So again, there are voluntary or required enrollments. We establish legal parentage when it's unknown, and we recommend monthly child support amounts that are realistic. Work to collect child support from payers' attachable financial resources, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we have distribution rules for how child support is sent to the families. There is a limitation on the ability to find parents sometimes, so that makes some of this a little bit challenging, and we're unable to guarantee collection of child support. And again, this was established in 1975 as a federal-state partnership. And then the next slide starts just some statistics that we have. In fiscal year 2021, the child support program collected $320 million. Of that, 80% was collected through income withholding from an employee's paycheck, and then 20% from other sources, so whether it's bank accounts, tax offsets, voluntary payments, or contempt actions, those kinds of things. 96% of that went to families directly, and then 4% went to reimburse for public assistance dollars, and that would be the TANF program. We've served 134,000 families statewide and 13.8 million children nationwide, and it is one of the most cost-effective government programs. Kansas, as of 2022, had collected $5.99 for every dollar spent. The next slide, the total 40 cases. Yes, I'm sorry.
Interrupt you real quick,
Sure.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking over those amounts, and simply because I don't know, does the state withhold any of that for processing and administration? That money goes directly to the family. So anything that is, say, withdrawn or garnished or submitted to CSS for distribution or payment of child support, there are no fees associated with that to the individuals?
That's correct. There used to be, I believe it was 4%, but that was removed, I believe, 2015, around there.
2015.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Any questions? Let's see, state fiscal year 2022 numbers, the total caseload was 129,275. We established, that should be a comma there, 5,753 new child support orders. There were 19,419 parentages established. And then disbursements through the Kansas Payment Center were $376,155,220. $40 distributed was $389,637. And then the non-$40, so that would be all the other cases that we've been talking about, $196,632,413. The total transactions was $1,266,808, and then the non-4D transactions for distributed funds was $497. And then just some statistics on our IVRs. The Kansas Payment Center has their own interactive voice response system, and they took 391,000 calls, 340,374. And then the Child Support Services itself has an IVR as well, and that took 391,244. And then some of those go on to a caseworker, and that was 68,448 for Kansas Payment Center and 151,422 for Child Support Services. Any questions? Next slide is just some federal data that we've reported. New hire records, which would be any employer that hires someone, they're automatically reporting that, or they're supposed to be. There were 626,390 reported records. We had 133,762 active children. We initiated 77 tribal cases. And then this answers a little bit of your question about whether they have to be on assistance. So the cases that have never been on assistance of any type that have just applied directly, there were 67,159. And then caseload by current assistant, so the TANF program is 6,145. And then there are just some numbers on the income withholding that was received, both 40 and non-40, and then collections sent to other states, and then distributed collections. So the reason the distributed collections is a little different than the wage withholding number is sometimes we get collections that can't be distributed for some reason. Either it's a prepayment or parents aren't located, that kind of thing. So I'll pause, see if you have any questions about any of that. Okay, thank you. So the next few slides talk about the contracts that started in 2021. There were new contracts issued, and the organizational structure is on the next slide. Just kind of shows how that's split out now. We went from 4 contractors for for full service to 2. We've got Maximus and Young Williams doing the full service contracts, and that's split up. Maximus has the large jurisdictions, so they've got Shawnee County, Wyandotte County, Johnson, and Sedgwick, and then Young Williams has everything else. And then the Kansas Payment Center has been managed by Young Williams for quite a few years. I don't remember when they started that. The next slide just shows kind of a map of where the locations are. All the little stars are where offices are for DCF. And you can't see you do have the colored ones. So it shows where the offices are for Young Williams and Maximus. And then it's got our contractor interactive voice response system number, and then Kansas Payment Center information as well. Questions? Next slide is the Kansas Payment Center information, and this.
Marcy,
yes, sure.
Interrupt here real quick. Representative Humphreys.
So I'm sorry. If we go back to slide 12, remind me who is the who are full service contractors? That's who.
Young Williams and Maximus.
Yeah, but okay. Okay, just instead of the Kansas Payment Center.
Kansas Payment Center is just our SDU, so they distribute the money. Okay. So they don't get involved in like the case work kind of things. Yeah.
And then you might get into this, but the collection rate for do you have those numbers on that? As far as of all the child support that is supposed to be paid, because I know we've had that maybe in this committee. At some testimony or something, but do you have that, or are you going to get to that?
I may have it with me, but it's around 55%.
And that's for both?
That's current support only.
And that would be the 4D program that you're involved with?
Right.
And do you have any idea the non-4D, what their collection rate is?
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then you might get into this too, but I did have a little bit of questions about foster kids and what happens when there's child support. And so is that something you're going to cover later?
I don't
ask
have
that
it
now?
in here, but I'll try to answer your question.
Okay. So if a child goes into foster care, and the wage, the non-custodial parents who's paying foster care, their wages are garnished, but the child's not there with a custodial parent. So what happens to that money when from the payment center or from DCF?
Mr. Chair. So that money would be retained by the state. Generally, it's quite a bit less than the cost of foster care, but that would be retained until the child goes back home or to a caretaker.
Oh, so you said until they go back home, and so then the parent can get that money back?
Yes. Well, not the money that we've collected during that time
but
frame.
Just the monthly or whatever, correct. The payments. Mm-hmm. And do you keep track of that?
We do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That might be interesting. Okay, thank you.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Do you track the amount or the percentage of the child support that's collected from those individuals that are at or below the poverty line?
We don't have that data, I don't believe, right now. So, yeah, it's definitely, the data analytics is something that I've really been trying to get, my hands on a lot more of that information, because I do think that would be helpful to have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to, I think Representative Humphreys asked about the collection rate, and he said 55%. a 4D. That's just those who have support orders.
Right.
You see about 55% of that.
Yeah, so there are two measures. One is arrears collections, and these are federal measures that we're judged on every year, I guess if you want to call it that. And then there's current support. So current support has been right around 55% for a long time. And then arrears ranges from high 50s to 60s. Yeah.
Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be out of your wheelhouse, but I had a question regarding some issues. I believe there was testimony in a committee about back in 2021 regarding Maximus and their child support collection services. Have those issues been cleared up? Are they still having issues remitting those payments to those who are owed them, or do you have any idea what's going on with that?
So I think I know what you're talking about, but Maximus doesn't actually retain any of the money, so that all goes through the Kansas Payment Center. So I'm not sure if that was maybe with Medicaid or something. I'm thinking it might have been. But yeah, we have both contractors. We've got monthly reporting just on casework type things, but they wouldn't have anything to do with retaining collections.
My understanding was that there was an issue with Maximus specifically regarding the collection of child support payments and distribution or something through their call center. I don't think it was really, but I could be confusing that. I just recall that there was a hearing about that in 2021, and I was just hoping that the issues were resolved. So
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Thank you.
So we wouldn't have that issue now, but they don't actually handle any of the funds, so it all goes through the payment center.
And Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of a follow-up to my previous question, or several follow-ups. Is there a minimum amount of child support that would be assigned to a per child or per household amount? And I ask that question because I'm going to make the assumption that that minimum amount would probably be reflective of someone who would be making at or about minimum wage, if that amount would be there. Would there be a way that we could extrapolate that amount, and therefore we could take a relatively reasonable calculated guesstimation as to what the percentage would be based on the overall amount of child support that's being collected?
So if you assume that both parents are making minimum wage, there is a way to run a child support worksheet. I think that's what you're asking, is to get kind of a standard child support amount. The issue with that is there's so many variables in a case, like how many children, how old the children are, who's claiming them for taxes, who pays for insurance. All of those things get factored in. But if you're assuming none of that exists and it's one child at a certain age, you can do kind of a standard worksheet.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
The next few slides are just the Kansas Payment Center infographics for this year. I won't read all of the numbers, but just to kind of show you, because they do collect both 40 and non-40 payments, and that just shows you the breakdown between the two, and then how those are paid. So we've got the debit card, direct deposit, checks for the parent receiving support, and then we have the ability to do EFT, I think that's on the next slide actually, electronic funds transfer, MoneyGram, PayNearMe, PayPal, and then they've got KPC Pay. All of those options are available to a payor or a non-custodial parent. And their average EFT, so the average electronic funds transfer is 76.04%, and their accuracy rate is 99.994%. So they have done a really great job. Any questions about the payment center? The next slide talks about some of the technology upgrades that we're working on. think you guys may be familiar with some of them, but we are replatforming our cases system, which is the system that we use for all of the casework. The replatforming started in 2021, and it's basically moving our system from where it is on a DOS-based old system to a cloud-based system. So hopefully it will make changes a lot easier and faster. It'll allow automation to be easier to implement. The 4D system must be certified by 4D standards, so under the federal program, they must be certified. So our choice to do replatforming rather than going with an entirely new system has prevented some of the need for an entire certification, which can be a really lengthy process and a lot more expensive. Let's see. Some of the considerations, the changes in distribution will impact the non-4D caseload. Distribution will be at the person level, not the current case level. So right now, people can choose which case to apply funds to or payment to, and they won't be able to do that once this replatforming takes place. And then imaging itself is not part of cases. Contractors are currently providing and maintaining imaging software and storage, and we do have access to that. And then some of the other things that we're just working on, we've got an online application that's going to be available hopefully pretty soon. We're working on that, and it will have a lot of the forms that people are required to fill out right now by hand. They'll be able to go in and type it all in like a TurboTax kind of thing. Any questions? And then the next few slides just talk about some of our enforcement methods and what we do when we consider a case delinquent. Payments are expected during the month they become due. They don't become an arrearage or past due until they remain unpaid into the next month. So it doesn't matter what day they fall on as due in the current month, it wouldn't be delinquent until the next month. And then the following actions are taken to attempt collection of support. Income withholding, again, and that's our biggest one. It's usually about 75 or 80% of collections. We do issue garnishments on bank accounts if there's an arrears balance and the account is subject to garnishment. Liens are automatically issued on real estate in the county where the order resides, and it can be registered as well in any other county in Kansas. Personal injury claims may be attached. Tax foreclosures, so if a house is foreclosed because of a tax bill, we can retain collections for that. And then recreational licenses can be restricted. Driver's license can be restricted, and we do have a limit right now of $2,000 per an agreement with KDOR. Federal and state tax refunds are intercepted, gambling winnings, passports, and then we do personal outreach such as phone calls, office visits, arrears forgiveness programs. And then the next slide talks about federal offset, and the few slides after that gets into a little more detail on each of the enforcement methods. The federal tax offset applies to arrears only. It's on, TANF debts must be at least $150 before they're certified. And then the NA debts, which is everything that's not TANF, must be at least $500. Intergovernmental debts are certified by the initiating state, so if we have an incoming case from another state, we would not certify them. And we don't certify if they're in Chapter 13 bankruptcy because typically those are paid through the plan. And they do require Social Security numbers, and it's the certification and decertification process happens weekly. Next slide is the state tax offset, and that does apply to any obligor debts equaling $25 or more. And again, they must have a Social Security number. It is matched weekly, and incoming interstate debts in that case are certified. And again, we do not certify the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Next slide is the passport restriction and credit bureau reporting. For passport restriction, we certify debts over $2,500, and the arrears must be paid in full before it can be released, even if it falls below that threshold. So even if it falls to $2,000 or less, it would remain certified. And then for credit reporting, all arrears cases that are over $1,000 are certified, except the outgoing intergovernmental cases. And no reporting is done for 90 days on new orders. Again, must have a date of birth and social. Any question?
Sorry, what do you mean by certified?
So there's just an action on our cases system. Sorry, we have all this lingo. There's an action on our cases system that we would certify someone, and so it automatically interfaces with whether it's passports or offsets and those kinds of things. So there's a way to not do that on the system, but otherwise they are once they hit that threshold. And there's just an automatic thing that happens on the technology side that.
So certified means that the restriction is in place?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Representative Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for asking that question because I'm kind of getting hung up on that one as well. So certifies and decertifies weekly on Friday nights. Maybe I missed this because I was kind of reading through everything very slowly and carefully, but this is for individuals who are in arrears, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in order for an individual to become in arrears, then, hold on, I'm trying to find, they would become in arrearage or past due once they are into the next month. And so let's say they missed a payment for the previous month. The next month that was due, they were still behind on that payment, but they paid that month's payment. That would be when they would become in arrearage, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So at that point, they would be then decertified and they would lose access to the other benefits mentioned following that.
So if they fall under the threshold, I'll just use the $150. So if they miss a payment and they owe $150, they would be certified for state offset. But if they pay that off in the following month, then it would be decertified again. So it's just kind of an automatic thing that happens with the system.
Okay. In this case, how does that affect, without considering the bill we just passed out of committee and on the floor, how would that affect individuals' benefits? Like if they were receiving child care assistance, SNAP or TANF, how would that go on to affect those benefits already without noting the bill that we just passed on the floor?
So the child support program is completely separate from eligibility. So unless we communicate with them that someone's not cooperating or something along those lines, the two systems don't talk, so it wouldn't affect their benefits.
Yes, as discussed before, but that's why I'm kind of getting hung up on the certified and decertified. So what is it certifying and decertifying? Like that system, as we heard with a previous bill, I don't know if you're aware of that, the systems don't talk. So the systems will now have to be designed to speak to each other. But what part of the certification, decertification does that affect too? Like, is that something where is that kind of the same system that would be used or no?
No, it wouldn't. So when I say certification or decertification, I just mean for that specific enforcement tool. So they're certified for tax offset or they're certified for passport restriction or something like that, or decertified. So I'm referring strictly to those enforcement measures.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I'll just wait till the end. I think
Okay.
we're pretty close. So.
Sure. So the next slide talks about administrative remedies. So these are some of the things I mentioned earlier. Recreational licenses. If someone owes over $500, they're certified again for these particular programs, and they have to set up a payment plan before it will be released. And that's their fishing, hunting, stamps, tags for boats, park and camping fees, those kinds of things. So that threshold is $500. And then I mentioned the 2,000 driver's licenses we can restrict, and they must owe at least $500 on that. And the match starts after no payment for 90 days on that one.
Representative Hoagland.
What stamps?
like drug stamps or those kinds of things.
Okay, not postage, that's all.
No. Yeah. I know that's something that they get really wound up about.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to, I always make these things fall apart, to slide 19 on the payment delinquency enforcement. It listed driver's license may be restricted. Do you happen to know kind of what that restriction would entail? I mean, I assume they'd be able to go to work and back?
Yes, they can. It's work, school, if I remember correctly, and maybe medical appointments. I'd have to look at the statute to be sure, but I believe those are the three exceptions.
Thank you.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-ups. So on that one, 2,000, you can restrict 2,000 every month.
Correct, yes.
But what does that look like for the person? I mean, they have a driver's license. These are people who are renewing their driver's license and you don't let them renew? Or what do you mean, what are you, and I understand work and school, but.
Right, so they get a letter before it happens. So they're notified twice, I believe, before it actually happens that's going to be restricted. So they wouldn't, I guess, be really aware of it unless they were pulled over or tried to renew. So, yeah.
Okay, and then just a little more explanation on slide 20 and 21, the federal tax offset and the state tax offset. Can you just explain that a little bit more? What does that mean?
So if they get a federal or state refund, they're certified.
That's all I needed to know.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, some of these things I just get so used to talking about that I forget.
Yes, but you're talking about refunds.
Yes, refunds.
Okay, thank you. That makes perfect sense now.
Representative Hoagland.
So we're going to go in the Wayback Machine. On slide 7, it says establishes legal parentage when unknown. At whose cost?
DCF pays that cost.
DCF pays for the DNA testing? Okay. And then on slide 9, parentage established is 19,419. Does that mean we did 19,419 DNA tests? Or is that something?
No, not necessarily. So parentage can be established if there's someone on the birth certificate or the birth record, and that makes it a lot easier. We don't have to do genetic testing, or if there's a presumption some other way. So not always.
Okay. And then on 17, in technology upgrades, you're saying contractors are currently providing and maintaining the image software and storage. Is that costing a lot to have them store that? Or is it better to have them store it than to store it ourselves? I mean,
Yeah, so the contract that, the bid that they gave, or the contract price, included all of that. So we're not paying anything additional for it, no matter how many documents come through there. Yeah. Sure.
Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, this is certainly not relevant to a bill that we are currently hearing in this committee, but I have heard that the Senate is hearing a bill, or I don't know exactly where it is in the process right now, but that basically states that they would like to do child support enforcement for the father of a child in utero. So looking at this, where you all, the DCF takes on the responsibility of the cost for establishing legal parentage when unknown. Like I said, I may be getting ahead of myself because we aren't hearing that bill in this committee, but just out of curiosity, my understanding is that in order to establish the parentage while a child is in utero, amniocentesis or something of that nature would have to be done. Exactly how much could that cost the DCF to complete that?
That's a great question. I am aware of the bill. I have no idea what the cost for an amniocentesis is, and I believe you're correct that would be the only way to do it.
Safe to say it's probably quite a lot, I would imagine.
I would agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the sake of this discussion, I will say that I worked as an administrator in an office for taking care of pregnant women, and we can do testing for parentage and stuff with a blood test now. So it doesn't have to necessarily be amniocentesis. So just so you know, and I think it was about, if I remember correctly, it's like $100 to pay out of pocket.
Representative Humphreys, and then
Yep. So same issue. I'm wondering, because if you establish parentage by the presumptive there's statutes that we know who the presumptive parent, father we're talking about, because we pretty much usually know who the mom is. But so presumptive father, or on the birth certificate, if they're married or living together, they're presumptive. So I'm just curious. I don't know in the bill if it has to be scientifically decided who the father is, or if it's a presumptive father, because that would be another way that there wouldn't have to be a test if they're married or living.
I believe that the bill states that it would have to be scientific.
Okay. I don't know about it, so we'll have to.
I just heard about it within the last few days.
Okay, Thank you. Thanks.
we wish the Senate luck on that one. So going back to the child support systems, the current statute requires cooperation for the individuals, and I think individuals are defined as a custodial parent in order to receive the child care assistance. And then we considered that bill that added the non-custodial. And then there was also the discussion from DCF with regards to the federal government having some issues with stopping certain child support payments before 12 months. Can you walk through the current system and what would happen if that bill became law, and also talk a little bit about that federal complaint to the state as far as how we're handling those payments?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with what you're referring to, the 12 months. Can I defer to Tanya?
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Committee. Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary for the Department for Children and Families. Chair, I believe you're referencing House Bill 2179. Or are you asking about House Bill 2141?
A little bit on 2141, just how the systems would work. And we had some discussion in committee and then back and forth. And also, I guess that if we did that one first, and then we can move on to the federal issue as well.
My understanding was, thank you for clarifying. So for House Bill 2141, in terms of the costs around, there would still be a cost to the agency because our systems don't currently talk to each other to know whether or not a non-custodial parent might also be a food assistance beneficiary. And so when you have the 12 months, I think the original bill said it needed to look at each month, and for each month that they were, I believe the phrase was delinquent with some other details, that then that food assistance would stop for that individual, the non-custodial parent who was delinquent. That at the time was the language. Then I believe an amendment occurred to think about, well, how about you look at that at natural renewal times when they do those at a 12-month review or another type of review that would be natural. So it wouldn't necessarily be monthly. It might be at the natural annual, which reduced the amount of work required to constantly check monthly to make sure. if that benefit was happening. So as my understanding is the question was changing and putting in that amendment and changing it to looking at those natural review periods, for example, at a 12-month or at the request of the secretary, I believe was the language. Would that impact our fiscal note? It reduces the FTE that we would need. We would no longer need personnel to do that. When you reduce it to that, we could absorb that. However, the need for the information systems to talk to each other, so there were information system costs for our child support system and our benefits system. We would need help with those two information systems and programming so they can talk to each other. So that cost, and we submitted a fiscal note. We did have an opportunity to submit a revised fiscal note. We didn't see it up available publicly, but we believe we submitted it, and that figure was $880,000. So the difference after those changes were made was no FTE personnel resources are needed. But yes, we would still need the system upgrades and the programming cost to upgrade the systems. Does that help?
Yes. Could you send the fiscal note to Gary or to the committee, the revised fiscal note?
Yes, we'll make sure that it gets everywhere it needs to be in terms of, and including division of budget.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, Representative Humphrey.
Can you remind me, some of those dollars were federal dollars? Will that be in in the fiscal note that you send also?
Yes, the format that we send to Division of Budget does have state general funds, fee funds, and federal funds. The SGF state general fund impact for that is approximately $235,000. Okay. So it's a portion of the 880.
Yep, thank you.
The 880 is all funds. I apologize.
Thank you.
So can we go back? This is, I think, somewhat related. The 2141 bill, and also I think it's 2179. That was removing any cooperation for child support. And can you do a quick refresh on the letter from the federal government with regards to the policy on cooperation and stopping payment when somebody doesn't cooperate and stopping that payment before 12 months is expired?
Yes, thank you. House Bill 2179 is about the program of child care. Our DCF brought that bill forward because with regard to the program of child care, so not food assistance, not TANF, but the child care benefit that you all heard about, if there is the non-cooperation with child care at different points. So let me back up a little bit. What our federal guidance and federal partners tell us is once someone is determined eligible for child care, that's for a 12-month block period. Once you're eligible, it continues for 12 months. We interpret, and our partners, or federal partners do as well, and that's the letter we got, that it says that current Kansas statute says if you are not cooperating with child support, for example, at month 3 or month 6 in that 12-month block, we would need to maybe stop that child care benefit. And our federal partners are saying that is not consistent with the federal guidelines for the program. They really need to, once they're eligible for child care, it's for 12 months. And you can't change that at 3 or 6 or 9 unless there might be some other qualifying factor, perhaps they wouldn't need it. So 2179 hopes to reconcile what we've heard from our federal partners, that we can't stop that child care benefit in that 12-month period. And we proposed language to remove child support cooperation requirements from the child care program, just the child care program. That's what 2179 is. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And from from what I remember, a lot of times when you initially start those benefits, the child support benefits, the individual's showing cooperation, and then cooperation sometimes includes activities over several months. And let's say they stop cooperating after 2 or 3 months at one of the steps in the process. That's when they would be determined non-cooperating, and then you'd have to take care of it from there. I'll have to double check that amendment on House Bill 2141 to confirm this, but 2141, I'll go back and check it, but moving that to an annual review, would that take care of the federal concern rather than making it any month that they're delinquent or not cooperating? Sorry, not delinquent, but when they're not cooperating, they would no longer receive that benefit at the next annual review.
So the House Bill 2141 is only regarding SNAP, and then the House Bill 2179 is related to child care, and that was where the problem was from the federal government.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks. Further questions, committee? Okay. With that, thank you very much for the presentation. And next week we have, and there might be a few changes to the agenda still for next week, but we've got a couple of meetings, Tuesday, Thursday, and then the following week, we might give up our Tuesday meeting to Susan, Representative Chair Kincannon's committee. She has a group coming in on Tuesday that she wants to have present at a meeting, and they're only coming in on the 21st. So we're kind of looking at that week. She may give me her Monday or Wednesday in exchange for Tuesday. In case there seems to be some curiosity on the bill we heard last week regarding the homeless question, I think in the last, in 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks from today, we may have just more of a committee discussion, maybe even a roundtable on this whole topic. Bring in some experts, some people that have worked in this field, and just more have a general discussion. I don't think we're not going to work the bill this year, but may prep some ideas for next year. So just in case anybody's asking you, no, there's no intention of working that bill, but we do intend to have some sort of a roundtable discussion on that topic. If there's no further discussion, we are adjourned. Thank you.